Hi, everybody. Aaron from Fleetistics, and it is that time again to do our hurricane preparedness video for fleet operators. And every year we put out this video and kind of rehash some of the things that we talk about in order to get your fleet ready and what happens to your business if your fleet is hit by a hurricane. Now, obviously, this doesn't pertain to everybody, but as we saw last year, you don't have to be on the coast in order to have a major problem, right? Asheville, which I would have never thought would ever have experienced what they did. I've been to Asheville for many decades, and it never even crossed my mind that a hurricane would come through Asheville and do what it did. So we all have to kind of, reset our understanding of where hurricanes can impact and the vulnerabilities that we have, and we need to, rethink what we've been doing in the past and see if it's something that is still going to work for us in the future. So everybody's got their own risk and risk tolerance, but in general, there are some things that we should be looking at, no matter where you are, whether it be tornado area, flash flood area, hurricane, et cetera, et cetera. So think about these things as it pertains to what you do and decide what's going to work for you. And what I recommend doing is actually creating a checklist. And actually, maybe what we'll do is actually put one together for you so you can download it and put a link in the description for you. So you can download it. You can start with that, and then build upon that because every business is going to be different, and you may want to include contact information or emails or specific information so you can hand this out to people within the organization and they know exactly what the game plan is. Right? You've got an SOP, standard operating procedure for particular events, right? We would like to think that we all have our businesses prepared. We've got nice written manuals like the military, and we can reference a particular scenario and we know exactly what to do, but that's not reality. So let's talk about a couple things. First is considering that risk factor, looking at the historic impact zones and then making that reevaluation and then deciding whether or not you want to move forward with some or all of the preparations that are necessary. And if you live in Tampa, like I do, or along the coast, Louisiana is like the largest hurricane magnet ever. Then you really need to be thinking about these things and be prepared on an annual basis. Really, in Louisiana, your guard just really only comes down for a few months every year before you start prepping again for the next year. So I would say the first thing that you want to do is check with your insurance agent. Are you properly covered? And I know in our area, wind and water are two separate things, right? For your building, but also potentially for your vehicle. So get with your licensed insurance agent and get clarification on your coverages to make sure that they are sufficiently covered, and then also that your quantities, the dollar values, are covered. You may want to ask about whether or not you can be insured for loss of revenue due to storms. If you can't service your customers for 30 days, what's going to happen to your business? Can you float that and actually get by with that? So think about all the different types of insurance and work with your agent to make sure that that's in place. Once a storm is on the radar, you can't get insurance. No one's going to insure you. I think the the limit is 30 plus days for being able to get a policy. So if you're within that, then you're not actually covered for 30 days till after. But again, check with your agent. The next consideration is dispersing your fleet. So if you know you're in the impact zone or real close to it, you can look at the winds, the flood areas, things of that nature. Consider dispersing your fleet. And if you don't do that today, that's something that GPS tracking has really facilitated over the years. I first encountered this when I was with Orkin Pest Control back in the 90s. And the idea of being able to take your vehicle home was really kind of a new thing because of the trust factors. But once you have the tracking in your fleet and you know how your vehicle's being used, then it's a lot easier to let them go home because they're not going to be driven to the grocery store and they're not being used instead of a personal vehicle. So consider dispersing your fleet. That minimizes the risk. You may lose some vehicles, but if they're all parked at your office and your office takes a direct hit, you lose your entire fleet. You can no longer service your customers. So that's a big problem. Disperse your fleet. And talk to the drivers about where they can keep vehicles at their house. You don't want them to drive it home and park it under a giant oak tree and put your vehicle at greater risk than it would be if it was left at the office. So, work through that conversation with your drivers one on one. The next thing is to consider ordering extra inventory. My background's in the pest control industry. That's how I got into GPS. So, you may want to consider ordering certain inventory that you may have a hard time getting hold of, that you consume a lot. I don't know that I would necessarily order more liquid chemicals, but maybe you can order more bait stations or bait or stuff like that more air ducts or air vents, if that's your business, or plumbing fixtures, whatever those things are that you tend to go through on a regular basis, and maybe stock the trucks up a little bit more. So if the office is down for 3, 4, 5 days, the trucks can still do what they need to do because they have the inventory on the vehicles. Okay. Next is conduct all the preventive maintenance. Look and see what's coming up. Does a particular truck need a brake job sometime in the near future? Let's go ahead and get that done now before the hurricane season starts. So it's one less thing that we have to worry about potentially taking a vehicle down, or that vehicle might even be a spare vehicle that you want to have ready to go in the event that you lose a primary vehicle. The next thing to think about is how will you service your customers, and how are you going to communicate with them, and what guidance are you going to give to the employees that are going to keep them functional. It is totally possible to continue to operate. It's just a matter of how much time and money you want to spend on the preparation phase, right? Um, one of the considerations is you have to be prepared to operate without a mobile app. If your business, uses a mobile app for ELD or for work order management and payment processing and things like that. What are you going to do when the cell phone towers go down, or they get jammed, and you're not able to process on a mobile app, right? You've got to be able to go back to a paper form and still document the work that you did. But importantly, you've got to have justification for payment processing. And how are you going to collect that payment? And are you going to be able to collect that payment after a storm, or can you collect it right before a storm? So one of the things that you may also want to consider doing is actually servicing in advance. So if you know a storm is coming next week, try to take all those customers and get as many of those customers done as you can, right up to the very time that the storm is about to hit. You got to remember your employees need time to take care of their families too, so they can't work until the clouds hit the coast, and so work those customers in advance, put the long hours in, knowing that you're probably going to have a couple days of downtime when the storm's rolling over your particular area. And that's a really good way to avoid losing revenue. What we've seen in the past is customers that are impacted by hurricanes, they say, oh, well, hey, look, we don't need the service this month. Why don't we just go ahead and skip it? Well, when you have enough of your customers saying that, now all of a sudden you've lost a big chunk of revenue. So if you service them in advance, you won't run into that. All right. Let's see. So establish a communication plan, a chat group, or an alternate means of communication. We learned this lesson actually last year. This was a kind of a gap in our plan, in that our internet went down, and actually my home office went down for a couple weeks. Everybody else was back up, but our house, for whatever particular reason, was actually a couple houses in our neighborhood that was down for a couple weeks. So we were kind of stranded, and at that point, I decided to go out and get Starlink. And so I have a Starlink unit in the garage, and I can go online before a storm. I can activate it, and I can have satellite communication up and running. So as the leader of our organization, I can communicate with everybody. If I had to take incoming messages and respond to messages from customers, then I could do that as well. Our customers that are in California don't really care if we have a hurricane. We got a problem here. So we have always been able to go mobile in our business because of the hurricanes. We were early Microsoft 365 adopters, and we can pick up and go home. We can go on a road. We can work from a hotel. We can work from anywhere. All we need is an internet connection, and Starlink is part of that plan. When you're talking about communication internally with your employees, do you have a call tree? Is everybody's cell phone number up to date? Can you text everybody? Is there a text group? Or do you have a chat app that everybody's going to get on? And that way everybody's getting real-time information, and you can check on people. Last year, one of our employees, Kim, who lived south of Sarasota, we lost touch with her for a couple, I don't know, maybe a day or so, but everything was down. So I actually had to drive down there and made it to her house. Unfortunately, she was okay. Her street was was under 3 or 4 feet of water, but her house was raised, and they were okay by some miracle. They actually live on a canal, and they didn't flood, but everything around them was flooded, so they were isolated. So having a good communication plan, having the backup satellite communication, it's $600-800, whatever it is, and then you can turn it off, and then you just turn it back on when you need it, and you're back up and running. And it could be a hotspot too. So if you actually got together with everybody in the park, you could connect up, and as long as you weren't watching videos, you'd be able to get email messaging done. In the case of a fleet, you need to determine what you're going to do about fuel, right? In a lot of service companies, you need to fuel up every couple days. So, what are you going to do about fuel? Can you stockpile 5 gallon gas cans somewhere to be able to continue to service customers? Maybe if you go down to servicing just emergencies, then you can conserve your fuel in 5 gallon cans. Will suffice, or you can get bulk fuel staged at the office. Maybe get a 500 or a couple 500 gallon tanks and get them fueled up before hurricane season and hope that you don't need them. If you don't need them at the end of hurricane season, just fill all the trucks up and, run it dry until next year and get another delivery. All right. And then also, how are you going to communicate with customers? Are you going to do a mass message? Are you going to post to your website? Do you have an email newsletter mechanism? Do you have an SMS capability? Whatever those things are, they need to understand the plan because they're going to be in panic mode, and you want to get them serviced early. You're going to have to be able to communicate with them, and then if you don't get them serviced, you're going to have to communicate with them. Hey, we're going to be late, or we're pushing everything back 3 days, or hey, I would like to come, provide your service on such and such a day and time, and try to get all those things rescheduled. That's where you obviously have to talk with your office staff to bring those fleet operations together with administration and the other departments. And then let's see, I talked about servicing before the storm, reducing the revenue. So that looks like it's about it for the fleet preparations. If you have some more ideas around the fleet, then hey, share them in the comments below so everybody can benefit. And hopefully we don't have to worry about this. Each year they predict the storm count or whatever. I don't know. It just never seems to be right. But you never know when the big one's gonna hit your area. So stay prepared and hopefully stay safe. Thank you.